On Valentine's Day 2018, Nicholas Cruz killed 17 people and injured 17 others at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, the worst school shooting on record. In December 2018, Tevin Biles Thomas, the brother of Olympic gymnast Simone Biles, killed 3 people at a New Year's Eve party in Cleveland, Ohio. And in September 2019, 14-year-old Mason Siss killed his entire family, including his father, stepmother, and 3 siblings in Alabama. Many people do not want the names of these killers used in the media, and understandably so. I would never try to excuse what they've done, but I do want people to know that they're human. They were children, and they suffered tremendous childhood trauma at an early age. Their lives didn't have to turn out this way, and it's possible that tragedies like these could be avoided through early intervention. My own son was adopted from Guatemala when he was just 6 months old, and we strongly believe he was neglected by his foster mom before we got him. From the beginning, we struggled with sleep issues, severe meltdown tantrums, and rages that lasted up to 4 hours at a time. As he grew older, his anger became more intense. He suffered severe anxiety, and he became violent. I started to believe the stories I just listed might be his future. I feared I was raising the next school shooter. Thank God we don't own weapons. After a very long journey with medical professionals, teachers, and therapists, we finally got the correct diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder, also called RAD. This is a rare and serious mental illness associated with early childhood trauma, and it's scary. I don't believe people are born inherently bad, but life circumstances can drastically change their personality, attitude, and outcome. Children need healthy attachment to a trusted adult in order to feel safe and protected. These early bonds set the stage for their relationships with others for the rest of their lives. And believe it or not, that first year of life is most critical for brain development and attachment. When these early bonds are lacking, a child's ability to feel empathy, trust others, and form solid relationships can be drastically affected. These kids use anger as a protective shield, and if not treated, they can turn self-destructive, violent, and even criminal. Let's take a look at where these particular news stories began. Nicholas Cruz was placed into foster care by his mentally ill, alcoholic, drug-addicted birth mother, who was also a convicted criminal, and adopted into a family. At the age of 5, his father passed away, and shortly afterwards, his mother died. He never attached with anyone. Tevin Biles Thomas and his siblings, including Simone, were removed from the care of their drug-addicted birth mother on multiple occasions for severe abuse and neglect. They were eventually split up, raised in 2 different families in 2 different states. He never bonded with anyone. And Mason Siss, the kid who killed his family, was removed from the care of his neglectful birth mother at the age of 6, placed into the care of his father and stepmother. And according to news stories, he never attached with anyone either. Kids like these are not uncommon, and we now have an epidemic of kids diagnosed with these mental illnesses associated with insecure attachment, reactive attachment disorder, developmental trauma disorder, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, etc. Desperate caregivers like myself struggle to get help as medical professionals and teachers associate these behaviors with bad parenting. Cool. Most of the therapies and treatments for these illnesses are not covered by insurance, and many of these kids slip through the cracks, labeled as bad kids and tossed aside. Kids who fail to form meaningful bonds with a caregiver can become aggressive, antisocial, and even violent. These kids without treatment could grow up to become sociopathic criminals like the boys I listed earlier. Some experts believe Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh and serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer may have suffered from trauma as well, or from RAD as well. Being the parent of a child with RAD is lonely. It's terrifying, and there's very little guidance out there. Many of us RAD parents suffer ourselves with PTSD from being mentally and or physically abused by our own children. In a regular abusive relationship, the victim is instructed to leave, but you can't do that when it's your own child. So back to our story, my husband and I adopted these boys when they were both just 6 months old from Guatemala. They would be here today, but they're teenagers now, and they're at a very important music festival. My first son was incredibly easy. My friends actually referred to him as the Stepford child. We thought it was our stellar parenting. When the second one came along, things were noticeably different from the very beginning. My son was, looking back, the signs of childhood trauma were there. We just didn't know what to look for. My son was awake 4 to 5 times a night until he was almost 11. That's years, not months, so you know we were exhausted. He wasn't smiley like other babies. Normally when you smile at a baby, they smile back. It's a form of communication, not ours. He also didn't give us eye contact, and he didn't follow us around the room with his eyes like normal babies do. And he wasn't snuggly. When we would try to cuddle with him, he would actually arch his back and try to wiggle away from us. We learned later that's a sign of neglect. He wasn't used to being touched. As he got older, he became hyperactive, often running away from us. When that happened and we almost lost him in an airport, I finally broke down and bought one of those kid leashes, you know, the ones that elicit all the dirty looks from strangers. Some of you are giving me that look right now. I figured it was better than losing my kid. And like I said, he's having these extreme tantrums where he's inconsolable for up to 4 hours at a time. There's no consistent triggers. His anger went from 0 to 60 in a matter of seconds, often resulting in embarrassing scenes in public places. Cool. In 5th grade, there was a noticeable shift. Until that time, his behaviors were reserved for just my husband and me. Weren't we lucky? One of the traits of RAD is that the primary target for these behaviors is the main caregiver. So, but in 5th grade, it started to seep into the classroom environment. He would lash out at kids on the playground. He would lock himself in the bathroom. His anxiety was so bad he could make himself throw up. So he pretty much spent all of 5th grade in the nurse's office. Meanwhile, I was losing jobs left and right because employers aren't that understanding when you need to leave early multiple times a week in order to pick up your kid at school. It took us almost a decade to get to the right diagnosis. In the beginning, they insisted he had ADHD after just 5 minutes of examination. Another doctor thought maybe he had sensory processing disorder, and as he grew a little bit older, we suspected maybe he was bipolar. One of our therapists threw out the term oppositional defiant disorder and told us, oh, he just thrives on negative energy. Okay. Another doctor thought maybe he's on the autism spectrum. They also threw out a terminology like conduct disorder and OCD. With each new diagnosis came a new medication. And if you're familiar at all with psychotropic medications, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to build up in your system and determine effectiveness. So after 2 weeks of living in hell, I would call the doctor and say, I don't think this is working. And he would tell me to just stay the course. At the end of our time, if it still wasn't working, now it takes 2 to 3 weeks to wean him off of this med before we can wean him onto a new one. We were on a constant roller coaster of medications over the years, probably tried about 13 different ones. I never felt right about it, but I figured they're doctors. They must know what they're doing. In between medications or in addition to medications, we were big participants in therapy. In the beginning, my husband and I took the boys to family therapy, which really looks like parenting classes. The therapists would throw out innovative techniques like sticker charts and marble jars and monetary incentives, all of which worked on my first kid. None of them worked on my second. As he got a little bit older, he would go to individual therapy, where he would meet with the therapist for about a half hour, and at the end of the session, we would come in to get a recap and create a plan of action. In elementary school, we added group therapy. They called it friendship groups. The group worked on things like anger management and socialization skills, and my son was the leader of the group. In the right frame of mind, he could tell you exactly which tools he needed to access in order to calm himself when he's upset, but in the moment, he couldn't access it. He would trash his room, he would destroy property, he would punch holes in the walls, he would throw heavy objects, usually at my husband or myself, and often leaving bruises. We tried art therapy. We tried play therapy. At one point, we even qualified for in-home therapy, which is really strange. This is when a therapist comes to your home and pretends to be invisible while you go about your business, and they intervene when they think it's necessary. It is completely awkward. I was also eager to try alternative treatments in lieu of Western medicine. When he was about 4, we went to a homeopath who gave us some all-natural solutions for his behaviors, which really didn't do anything. We were early adopters of neurofeedback, which actually can be very effective for kids with reactive attachment disorder, but at the time it was new, it wasn't covered by insurance, and it was expensive. I think we spent about $2,000 for 10 sessions, and at the end of our sessions, we didn't notice any noticeable differences, so we quit going. It actually takes a lot more than 10 sessions. We saw a nutritionist who insisted his behaviors would change if we just changed his diet. So we took out red dyes, we tried an elimination diet, we all went gluten-free for a while. That wasn't the magic cure either. We even tried the brain balance program that you may have heard about on the radio, but after 2 sessions at $5,000 a pop, again, not covered by insurance, we didn't see any noticeable difference, and we were going broke. In 6th grade, we hit what we refer to as rock bottom. This is the age where I became afraid of my own child. In one instance, my son woke me up from a sound sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning by punching me in the head. When I asked him about it, he insisted he was angry that I took away his video games 9 hours earlier. In another instance, he took a giant butcher knife out of the kitchen drawer and threw it at his brother, causing us to now lock up all of our sharp objects in the home, which makes it rather hard to make dinner. And an incident in the classroom got him kicked out of his middle school. At the new school, during the transition period, another incident had the school resource officer throw him to the ground, slap him in handcuffs, toss him in the back of a squad car, and haul him off to the juvenile assessment center, where I wasn't allowed to pick him up for several hours. When I questioned that, they insisted they need to know what's going on at home to cause these behaviors. That was the day I thought I'd lose both of my children. Another trait of Rad is that these kids aren't always truthful, so I had no idea what he was going to say to these people. Instead, we went home with a ticket, got a summer of community service, and a year of probation at the ripe old age of 12. Kids who suffer from trauma live in survival mode at all times. Their adrenaline is constantly pumping. This is the limbic brain, which is known for the fight, flight, or freeze response to stress. My kid was really good at the fight. This is the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that if a bear is chasing you, it tells you to run. So when you're in that frame of mind, you can't access logical thinking. In addition to that, my son was lacking higher level thinking skills. These brain scans show on the left a child who was raised in a loving home for the first year, and on the right, a child who was neglected. So you can see in the temporal lobes, there's almost no activity going on. This is the part of the brain known for things like learning, memory, motivation. and emotional regulation. This is why when my kid's throwing a 4-hour tantrum, there is no way we're going to talk him down from it. He doesn't have those skills. There is hope. Childhood trauma does not need to be a life sentence. With the right kind of treatment, these kids can go on to live normal lives and form healthy relationships. The right kind of treatment involves neurologically rewiring the brain and building self-esteem. These kids truly believe they deserved the abuse and neglect they suffered, and the right kind of therapy can teach them otherwise. But we need to catch it early, and we need to start treating it right away, and that's not currently happening. Our story has a happy ending. At the Juvenile Assessment Center, I stumbled upon the name of this amazing man who is a world-renowned expert in reactive attachment disorder. With him, we did a 2-week family therapy that was 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, 4 therapists, and all 4 of us. It was really intense. There are a variety of techniques used throughout that time period, including helping my husband and I identify and overcome our triggers, helping my son heal from his trauma, and helping us all become more connected as a family. It was the greatest thing we ever did. But again, not covered by insurance and certainly not cheap. We also found a therapeutic school environment for him designed for kids with behavioral and social issues. At this school, they did all expeditionary learning. They had a social worker who met with the kids every single day. They had a therapy dog that came to visit. They did things like yoga and meditation. It was a phenomenal environment for him. And at home, we were using the same techniques we learned in therapy and the same disciplinary tactics they were using at the school. They actually had a class for us. So by having this magic triangle of therapy, home, and school all working together, my son was finally able to make some progress, and he started to heal. Now, if you think childhood trauma doesn't affect you, you're dead wrong. The long-term cost of childhood trauma to society tops $100 billion. These kids are costing taxpayers for foster care services. They're disrupting classrooms and interfering with instruction. They're clogging our hospitals and prisons. And God forbid they could be your killer someday. All of this can be avoided if we can start designating some resources to treating childhood trauma as soon as abuse and neglect is identified. What do we need? We need better mental health services. We need better insurance coverage. We need trauma-informed schools. We need to stop treating the parents and guardians of these kids as the enemy. This is not a parenting problem. It's a mental illness, and it's treatable in the majority of cases, but only if we can start early. My son is mostly healed now, and he's doing amazing. He was lucky to have parents with the resources and determination to get the right help. He was lucky we started early, and frankly, he was lucky we didn't give up. My son is a survivor, and he's now achieving things we never thought possible. Let's give all kids who've suffered from childhood trauma a chance at a normal life. It'll help us all form a healthier and safer society.